Runes are certainly the most mysterious alphabet known to mankind, which is fitting since the name rune actually translates to secret or mystery. We really don't know where they came from, how they evolved, and we certainly don't know when they actually originated. But runes are certainly an alphabet, and a lot of people mistake that they are a language in and of themselves, but they're not. They're an alphabet, much like our alphabet, like the Greek alphabet, like the Phoenician alphabet, like any other writing system. But furthermore, they are also a philosophy, which gives them extreme complexity. So it is no wonder that they've become so wondrous and mystical to a lot of people in the modern world. You couple their complexity with their mystery, and you have an absolute wonderful aspect for the human imagination to truly go crazy with. Traditionally speaking, though, runes were believed to have emerged around 500 AD. This was commonly held amongst most scholars. However, logic and reason pushed them back a little bit further because even at the time when most scholars believe that they emerged around 500 AD, it emerged as a fully functional alphabet. It emerged as if it was already in use for a long time. But then later archaeological discoveries pushed it back further. And then again later, further archaeological discoveries pushed it back even further and further and further, and this kept happening on repeat. Then, out of nowhere, we come across this wonderful, beautiful, complexly designed little bone comb, like a hair comb. Not that it would matter to me, anyways. But on this comb is a fully functional Elder Futhark inscription. And Elder Futhark, of course, is the earliest form of runography that we know. But even at this point, even though this pushed the dating back a little bit further to 150 to 250 Common Era, we still see it as a fully formed language, as if it had been around for a long time already. So even though scholars were able to accept that it was pushed back even further, a lot of scholars still beg the question, why is it fully formed at this point? It had to have had earlier origins. Then in the fall of 2021, we find a wonderful inscription in Norway, which pushed back the origin of runes even further. Now, all of a sudden, we're saying that they're at least 2,000 years old. But here's the complexity again. It already shows a fully formed alphabet. So with each time that we push back the timeline a little bit further, we're also finding a fully formed, fully functional alphabet. Yet with this discovery, though, it began to beg a lot of questions. The inscriptions were extremely shallow and very hard to see. And this brought up a lot of curiosity among scholars. The optimists are now saying that we need to reevaluate or reanalyze everything in hopes to find earlier origins, while the pessimists are saying that this is so shallow that anything older could not actually be identified. We would never be able to actually see anything that predates this new inscription that we found in 2021 and was made public in 2023. There's no way that we would be able to identify anything any earlier than this because it's so shallow and so vague. Yet all of this is starting to align with what Tacitus showed us, because Tacitus actually mentioned the runes in his treatise on Germania, which he had written in 98 AD, or 98 Common Era. And he had already mentioned the fact that they had a form of writing system, that they had incisions that they would make on things, and this seemed to be an alphabetized system. This is what a lot of people take to be runes, and they would also use these as a form of divination. So we not only have the question of when did the runes emerge, but we also have the question of where did the runes emerge from. And that becomes even more mysterious and more complex. Today, there's an extremely fashionable growing trend that tries to connect the runes to the Phoenician alphabet. And there can be no doubt that there are strong similarities between not only the cultures, but especially the alphabet. However, we don't see any transference of words from Phoenician to German or from German to Phoenicians. And if the Germans were in contact with the Phoenicians, we would certainly see an exchange of language, so we would think. However, I do admit that there are some arguments against this. For instance, we might see Germanic words in Phoenician but not recognize them as Proto-Germanic words because our understanding of Proto-Germanic is so vague and so limited that it could easily go under the radar. There's also the argument, the fact that a lot of times when there's a transference of language, it becomes more like the people who take it on. So, for instance, we see a lot of German in American language, in English language, but in Britain we see it becoming very English oriented, and in America we see it becoming very Americanized. For instance, a lot of immigrants, whenever they came over to America, they Americanized a lot of their language and their names and so forth. So this very well could have happened with the exchange of words between the Germanics and the Phoenicians. However, this is very vague and very speculative and very open to personal interpretation. In other words, this isn't an exact science, so it's not worth us putting a lot of eggs into that basket, for instance. But there are certainly connections between early runes and the Gaulish language, or the Celtic people, in other words. A lot of early Celtic writings are done in a type of runes, and I do believe that the Phoenicians had extreme influence on the Celtic people. And the Celtic people had extreme influence on the Germanic people. But one thing that we have to keep in mind and keep a visualization of is the fact that these labels, whenever we're saying Celtics and Germans, Germans and Norsemen, Norsemen and Slavs, these are all labels that were applied externally. They didn't call themselves this. They were all deeply connected and severely intermingled. So we see a lot of exchange between Celts and Germans because there wasn't really the differentiation that we placed to that. That was a foreign aspect and something that we solidified in a more recent time, in other words. So yeah, it's very plausible that there was a deep interchange between the Celts and the Germanics, and the Slavs and the Germanics, and the Norsemen and the Germanics. They're all intermingled, and the lines are not so cut and dry as we wish them to believe in our modern world. Furthermore, the Celtics had a much wider range than what we attribute to the Germans. So it is very, very likely that the Celts had extreme interplay with the Phoenicians, so to speak. Yet one alphabetic form that was very popular amongst the Celts was the Etruscan alphabet. And this we do know has a deep connection with the Phoenician alphabet, but furthermore we also see that it has a deep connection with Germanic, so to speak. And the connection really comes from the Nagal helmets that were found in the northern Alps, if I remember correctly. I believe in modern-day Slovenia. But on there, on helmet A and B very specifically, we see very German words, German names even. And it seems to be a sort of interplay, a sort of mediate between the old Celtic alphabet and the new emerging Germanic runic alphabet. So these helmets actually could very plausibly display a sort of Proto-Germanic or Proto-Runic alphabet, so to speak. So with that being said, it seems as if the Phoenicians had an influence on the Celts. The Celts had an influence on the Germans, and that is where our runic inscriptions actually might have originated and come from.